Good morning, everybody. Today's hearing will examine what we call the emerging issues involving child online exploitation and the evolving offenders that seem to keep up to date on everything they can do to harm these young people. As technology changes and evolves, so do bad actors who use it to commit all types of crime. This is especially true in child exploitation space. Gone are the days of ordering child exploitation material from overseas by mail. Now, child exploitation material is readily available online through various file sharing platforms, through direct access to victims and domestic and international websites and groups such as quote unquote 764. Not only has technology changed, but today's online child offenders have changed as well. Today's online offender is more violent, more cruel, and more shocking than offenders just 20 years ago. Offenders will manipulate, pressure, harass, and seek to control vulnerable children through extortion, blackmail, and shame. That conduct is commonly called sextortion. Offenders extort children for money or other things of value, or to manipulate them to commit harmful acts, to live stream or record for others to watch. Today's offenders target younger children, many between the ages of 12 and 15, but some as young as 5 and 6, and maybe in some cases even younger. Offenders exploit multiple victims, causing more pain, causing humiliation and degradation to more people than ever before. They leave families of victims in insufferable pain and despair and cause lifetime of recovery for many victims. Offenders feel emboldened to carry out their illegal conduct on our children because of access to private, hidden online groups of like-minded people who share their sick desire to harm and exploit children. Sadly, offenders often operate under the cover of secrecy, making it even more difficult for law enforcement to identify them and bring them to justice. They often focus on vulnerable populations, such as those with mental health issues, lack of strong family or community ties, or other insecurities. Offenders will often disguise their true identity and pretend to be of similar age or background to their targeted victims in order to gain their trust. Offenders seek an online relationship with a child to exploit them for money, for sexual images, or to cause them to commit harm to themselves or to others. When offenders are eventually caught by law enforcement, prosecutors charge them with the most appropriate charges. However, there are no specific laws to address the terrible and shocking acts conducted by gore groups such as 764 and those engaged in sextortion. Two of the three bills that I introduced today will address these offenders. My first bill, called Ending Coercion of Children and Harm Online, ECHO for short, will address the horrific conduct that these gore groups do when they target children to commit violent acts like injuries to animals, self-harm, and suicide. The second bill, called the Stop Sextortion Act, will hold these people who engage in online threatening acts of sextortion toward children accountable under the same law which addresses child sexual abuse material. Finally, when offenders are convicted of child sex abuse material offenses, less than 1/3 of the cases are sentenced within the current sentencing guidelines. Simply put, then, the current sentencing guidelines are outdated and disregarded by most federal judges because they do not adequately account for common offenders' characteristics that differentiate the bad from the worst online child exploiters. That bill has the title Sentencing Accountability for Exploitation, or the SAFE Act. Will require the Sentencing Commission to draft and revise the child sexual abuse material guidelines to include many of the aggravating factors we now see with today's online offenders. Those factors include encryption or other masking techniques were used, or whether the offender was part of an online group to commit the offense, just to name a few. This bill will provide the much needed guidance to the Sentencing Commission of our government to overhaul the U.S. or the child sexual abuse material guidelines in a meaningful way to distinguish offender behavior. Now to Senator Durbin, ranking member.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and glad you're holding this hearing. And the fact that you've held this hearing, and we had similar hearings when I chaired the committee, I think is a message to all and who are following us. This is bipartisan, and it should be, start to finish. And we have a real task ahead of us. As Senator Grassley describes the legislation that is pending, I can recall the hearing for Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. And one of the big issues brought up over and over again were the use of sentencing guidelines for abuses in this area that were written so long ago they didn't reflect the reality of the extortion which is going on today. And judges of the most conservative political stripe and the most liberal political stripe were reaching the same conclusion, that those guidelines just don't work anymore. They were counting offenses by the number of images. Well, that might have made sense when we were talking about 8x10 photographs. It makes no sense when we're talking about technology of today and the videos that are involved. So we've got to update that and show the reality of the situation. And I think that's something we can all work on together. I learned something else. We would get unanimous votes in this committee, if you remember right. Republicans and Democrats would both be voting for the legislation that we think would change things for the better. And then it disappeared between the committee and the floor. And the same is happening now. We make great speeches here. We sometimes enact great laws in the committee, but when it comes to taking them to the floor, to enact them on the floor and eventually send them over to the House, we drop the ball completely. That's got to end. There's no reason for that. To invite these witnesses, as compelling as they are, and then to ignore their testimony when it comes to executing on the floor is unacceptable. Let's kind of decide at this point that if you're going to have the nerve to give a speech here on the subject, you ought to have the nerve to do it on the floor and do it repeatedly. So let's have a sense of urgency in what we're setting out to do. I work with Senator Hawley, in fact, many others too, survivors, law enforcement, advocates, to put together the Stop CSAM Act. The bill takes a comprehensive approach to stemming the tide of online child exploitation. I've repeatedly said we must bring the same sense of urgency to protecting kids in the virtual world that we do in the real world. But the landscape of online child exploitation is changing dramatically by the day. Two trends in particular demand our attention: financially motivated sextortion and sadistic online exploitation. What once was rare is now epidemic. In 2021, NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, received a total of 139 cyber tips involving financially motivated sextortion. 2021, 139 tips. In the first 6 months of this year alone, excuse me, they've received 23,000 of these tips plus. Offenders often operated in coordinated criminal networks overseas, targeting teenagers in the United States, and we'll hear specific cases about that. They coerce them into sending a sexually explicit image and then threaten to release it unless money's paid. For too many families, this crime ends in tragedy. NCMEC has identified more than 36 young men in the United States who've died by suicide after being sextorted. We are joined by one of those families. I said hello to Mrs. Woods and thank her for being here. But she lost her son, James, 17 years old, when he was targeted. She's here in a courageous capacity, and thank you for being here, transforming unbearable loss into call for action. That photograph of your son in his track outfit in front of the hurdles tells the story. I'm sure he was a wonderful young man, and you cherish his memory by being here today. Another disturbing trend is a rise in offenders who do not just view or trade images of abuse, but direct real-time torture, encourage escalating violence, groom children to produce CSAM, and self-harm videos. NCMEC has identified this behavior as sadistic online exploitation. The threat is accelerating. The numbers tell the story. This is an unacceptable systemic failure, and what are we going to do about it? We're going to have a hearing. We're going to call witnesses. We're going to lament the situation. What are we going to do about it? Is there going to be a bill in the new session? To say that we're so overwhelmed with legislation on the floor we don't have time is a joke. Watch the Senate and tell me that we don't have the time to take this up. We have more than enough time to do it right. This committee has a history of tackling the tough issues. Mr. Chairman, it's up to you and me and those on senators on both sides of the aisle to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to introduce our witnesses. We'll hear from them, and then we'll have questions. Ms. Tamia Woods and her husband, Tim, are parents of James Woods. James was a good student, year-round track and field athlete. At 17, James tragically took his own life November 2022 after being extorted by someone online for $300. James had sent the online abuser a compromising video of himself and was threatened with being exposed by the person if James didn't pay the $300 ransom. Mrs. Woods and her husband are the founder of the Do It for James Foundation. The mission of the foundation is to create awareness for kids and their families to prevent similar tragedies. We thank you, Mrs. Woods, for being here to share a heartbreaking story. Jessica Smolar is a former assistant U.S. attorney, the Western District, Pennsylvania. With 30 years experience there, Ms. Smolar handled a variety of criminal cases, including cases involving child sexual abuse material, child exploitation, and cybercrime and national security. Ms. Smolar has received several Department of Justice and law enforcement awards for her work as Assistant U.S. Attorney, including 2022 Attorney General's Distinguished Service Award and the United States Attorney's Victims Advocate Award for dedication and extraordinary contributions in the service of victims. Lauren Coffren is Executive Director of the Exploited Children's Division of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. She has been employed for over 20 years with the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, serving in various roles. Ms. Coffren oversees the Exploited Children's Division, which operates several programs, including Cyber Tip Line and Child Victim Identification Program. In addition, Ms. Coffren started the CSAM Survivors Services Program, working to improve the responses to survivors of child sexual abuse material. We welcome all of you here today, and it's our tradition to ask you to stand and swear to this oath. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you all very much. They all affirmatively responded. Now we'll start with Mrs. Woods. And don't forget to push the button on your... Okay.
Yes, sir.
Proceed.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and committee members, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Tamia Woods, and I speak on the behalf of myself, my husband Tim, and for our beautiful child, James Timothy Woods, forever age 17. I stand before you as a mother whose only child was taken by something so preventable, so cruel, and so ignored that it should shake every person in this room to their core. One of the messages sent to my son, and I quote, "I am more determined to rot your life than to make it a waste, a trash can, a shame, a dishonor, a hell, a real disaster, a hell on earth. And I remind you that I am heartless. I have no pity to rot a life as well as yours." This was one of almost 200 messages sent to my child over the span of 19 and a half hours between November 18th and 19th, 2022. James was the victim of financial sextortion, and though he died by suicide, let me be clear, he was murdered. James was a beautiful young man with a soul like gold and a smile that would light up any room. He would give you the shirt off his back. He could figure out anything. He was witty, thoughtful, kind, and loved chess. James was a high school senior. He wanted to major in pre-law, and he was months away from breaking a 40-year-old school record in the 110 hurdles. Every time I speak of him, I smile because I am grateful God let me borrow his angel for 17 and a half years. But every day I am angry. A woman online befriended James on Instagram. She created what every predator knows how to build, a safe space. She made him feel comfortable, seen, liked. She groomed him. Then she asked if he wanted to see her unclothed and exposed herself. She asked him to do the same. And like any innocent 17-year-old boy who liked a girl and saw no danger, he did. That moment she created became their weapon. The attackers came, not one person, but what we believe, at least four. For nearly 20 hours, they attacked, threatened, terrorized, dismantled my child. Every time he tried to fight back and ask, "Why are you doing this to me? Please leave me alone," they escalated, sending his image to friends and family, telling him he would be labeled a pedophile, telling him his future was over, telling him you should just kill yourself. And in those last moments, my son, who had everything to live for, felt like he had no other choice. A day that started with laughter, college friends, and joy ended with my husband finding our child unalive in our home in the middle of the day. No parent should ever enter a room and see that. I stand here because 19 and a half hours is not a short time in the digital world. It is a lifetime. It is enough time for someone to intervene, to flag an account, to cancel messages, to report this behavior. Yet no one stepped in. No system protected him. No platform stopped it. So my husband and I created the Do It for James Foundation. And since the day that James have died, we dedicated our lives to speaking out, teaching, and fighting so that no other parent feels the pain that sits in our heart every single moment of every single day. Large corporations continue to argue for rights while refusing to take responsibility. We are asking you to put laws in place that give us multiple avenues to protect our kids because parental controls alone are not enough. Click here to opt out at age 13 is not protection. Predators thrive when the risk is low, but reward is high. Criminals are making billions by exploiting our children because we tell our parents, monitor your kids better, while platforms refuse to monitor predators at all. How dare we lay blame on the victims while criminals walk free? Today, instead of checking on James' homework, instead of mailing him care packages to his college dorm, instead of cheering him on for track meets, I hold a picture of my son's photos that he never had a chance to see. Because that is all I have left. 17 and a half memories, 17 and a half years of memories, but no new ones. So I am begging you to stand with us, stand up, do something, help us save lives. We may not be able to save them all, but with the right laws, with accountability, with real consequences, we can make it harder for predators to win. We can make it harder for another parent to bury their child. Please do it for James. Do it for every child whose name we never got a chance to learn. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify here today. My name is Jessica Lieber Smolar, and I had the honor of serving as an Assistant United States Attorney in the Western District of Pennsylvania for 3 decades. During my career as a federal prosecutor, I personally handled and oversaw hundreds of child exploitation and human trafficking investigations and prosecutions. When I first began prosecuting these offenses, investigations often centered around physical evidence and traditional mail-based exchanges. Over time, I witnessed a monumental shift in the types of child sexual abuse material, also referred to as CSAM, that offenders collected, as well as their methods of collection. This shift was not limited to the sheer volume and disturbing nature of the material. It also encompassed the tools offenders used to acquire, share, and conceal CSAM. Today, every child exploitation case involves the criminal use of cellular phones and computers. Offenders use these tools to stockpile massive quantities of sexually explicit videos and images of children, frequently targeting prepubescent children. Violent depictions of infants and toddlers being sexually exploited were routinely collected by the defendants whom I prosecuted. Offenders also increasingly used advanced technology and platforms for CSAM trafficking. They congregate in online communities and darknet forums solely devoted to child exploitation. They can now more easily conceal their crimes and their identities through encryption, VPNs, the darknet, and remote erasure software. The law has not kept pace with the rapid technological advances or evolving sex offender behavior. United States Sentencing Guidelines, Section 2G 2.2, was designed when CSAM was distributed by mail. So it adds offense enhancements for actions common to all CSAM offenders today, like using a computer, possessing images of prepubescent minors, or amassing many images. The guideline enhancements apply broadly and no longer reflect varying levels of offender culpability or risk. Legislation is needed to amend the CSAM guidelines. The Sentencing Commission's June 2021 report found that Section 2G2 is outdated, leading judges to exercise their discretion to reduce sentences for child sexual offenders. The Commission's data for fiscal year 2019 showed that less than 30% of non-production child pornography offenders were sentenced within the recommended guidelines. This statistic reflects broad judicial dissatisfaction and leads to inconsistent sentencing nationwide. As federal prosecutors, my colleagues and I often considered plea offers to binding sentences to avoid the application of the insufficient sentencing guidelines and sentencing disparities. There are also emerging crimes that are not fully covered by existing criminal statutes, such as those committed by members of the violent online network 764. The 764 members befriend children sometimes as young as 9 years old through popular online platforms and then coerce them into escalating sexual, self-destructive, and violent behavior, compelling victims to document sex acts, harm siblings and family pets, cut and mutilate themselves, or attempt suicide. There are no federal statutes that adequately criminalize the coercive conduct of 764 and similar groups. As federal prosecutors, we focused on proving more conventional statutory violations, like CSAM possession or production or distribution of obscenity to minors, to effectively prosecute these horrific crimes. Similarly, law enforcement agencies have reported an alarming increase in sextortion cases, children being coerced into sending sexually explicit images online, like James that we just heard about. Perpetrators engage victims in flirtatious conversations on social media and gaming platforms where they feel comfortable to obtain explicit images. The offenders then use the sexually compromising images to blackmail victims for more images, or in the case of financial extortion, for money or gift cards. They threaten to widely publicize the image to the child's friends and family. Children suffer severe emotional distress as a result of such sexual extortion, and too many have engaged in self-harm or suicide. As federal prosecutors, we found it challenging to effectively charge sextortion and financial sextortion. Existing statutes do not adequately address the full scope or severe harm of these crimes. Increasing public understanding of the evolving and destructive risk to children online is crucial. Legislation is needed to strengthen the legal framework and better support those responsible for protecting children. I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the committee. My name is Lauren Coffren, and I am the Executive Director of the Exploited Children Division at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC. NCMEC is a nonprofit organization created in 1984 by child advocates to help find missing children, reduce child exploitation, and prevent child victimization. And I'm honored to be here today in order to share NCMEC's perspective on evolving online child sexual exploitation crimes. NCMEC is congressionally designated to operate 16 programs related to missing and exploited children's issues. One of NCMEC's core programs is the Cyber Tip Line, the centralized mechanism for the public and online platforms to report incidents of child sexual exploitation. Through its work with the Cyber Tip Line, NCMEC has seen children sexually exploited online for decades. Today, we are confronting alarming rates of emerging crimes where sexually exploiting a child is not the final objective, but a means of achieving a larger goal of financial gain or incitement of chaos. NCMEC shares this committee's deep concern that offenders will continue to evolve and escalate their exploitation of children online unless we act now to hold online platforms accountable when they facilitate a child's exploitation, to ensure safety by design is incorporated into development of new technology. Today, I'd like to share NCMEC's insights about 3 especially alarming new trends on how children are being sexually exploited online. One of the newest trends I'd like to highlight is related to online enticement, where reports grew by 192% last year. Specifically, we continue to see a rise in financial sextortion, where an offender blackmails a child for money or gift cards in exchange for not distributing nude or sexual images of the child. Unlike offenders who are normally sexually motivated, these offenders are driven by financial gain. As we heard from Tamia Woods just a few moments ago, this crime targets teenage boys, and too often the outcomes are tragic. High-performing boys with large social circles like James are becoming victims of coerced suicide as a result of this crime. Offenders use incessant, aggressive threats of public exposure, shame, arrest, as if the targeted boys fail to comply with the escalating demands for money. The second trend NCMEC has identified in the past year is sadistic online exploitation. This trend has led to the most egregious exploitation that NCMEC has ever seen. Violent online offenders work in groups, targeting and manipulating vulnerable children, some as young as 12 years old, on popular online platforms and gaming sites, to create and share sexually explicit content, to cut themselves, carving offenders' names into their bodies, to harm, to kill animals, to physically or sexually abuse other children, including their younger siblings, and even to commit suicide. These offenders lure children into online relationships, then terrorize them with rapid-fire threats to kill the child's family or disclose personal information if they don't comply with their demands. Reports of these brutal victimizations grew by 200% last year and continue rising. The third trend I'd like to note today is the use of generative artificial intelligence, or GAI, to sexually exploit children. NCMEC believes we're just beginning to see the true impact of GAI on child sexual exploitation. Offenders use GAI to create new sexually abusive content, to alter known child sexual abuse images, to nudify images of children, and to chat about how to entice and exploit children. In the first half of this year, NCMEC received over 440,000 reports connected to GAI, and we expect to have over 1 million reports by the end of this year. These three trends tragically affirm that online offenders are using evolving technology to exploit children in new and more extreme ways. This exploitation will not stop until Congress passes laws that close legal gaps, incentivizes companies to adopt safety by design, and provide essential tools to better protect children. NCMEC appreciates that Congress acted decisively to pass laws like the Report Act and the Take It Down Act, and supporting newly introduced bills like Stop CSAM Act, Enforce Act, the Safe Cloud Storage Act, and the GUARD Act. We need to ensure that these pending bills are passed and our laws to protect children keep pace with the technological advances. Thank you for allowing NCMEC to share our insights with you today. We look forward to continuing our work with this committee to share information, to craft legislative solutions, and to keep children safer online.
Whose children have committed suicide or without, and were also people that were severely harmed because of sextortion and online groups like 764. Is there any objection? I hear none, so that will be done. Mrs. Woods, I'm going to start with you. Recently, there have been several news reports of increased sextortion cases and how quickly bad actors can manipulate children into sending sexual images and then engage in a campaign to threaten towards the children, placing them in impossible situations. Many of those children think that suicide's the answer. You've promoted changes in various state laws to make sextortion illegal after the tragedy of your son. From a parent's point of view, why is it important to make these sextortion illegal under federal law?
Well, a number of things. First of all, we have to look at sextortion like what it is. It is our children are being sexually exploited. They are a sexually assaulted victim, and most people in general never speak out. Less than 30% actually speak out about being victimized. We have to make sure that not only our children see that we have their backs on these issues, but we have to make sure that they know that there are resources and laws that back them up as well. Our kids need to know that. And James never spoke to anyone. He had a wonderful, wonderful community that had his back, but yet he never spoke up. And so it's laws like this that would back our children and influence them to speak up and let them know that they're being victimized. And people need to be held accountable on top of that. They need to know that they shouldn't be comfortable with doing the things that they're doing. Right now, they're comfortable, and you see more and more people being victimized because of that.
Thank you, Ms. Coffren. You've been with the center for 20 years in a variety of positions involving online child safety. Describe the recent trends involving these violent gore groups like 764 and how they operate and target children online.
Sure. Thank you so much for your question. These sadistic online exploitation, violent online groups, they go by various names here that we've heard them referenced as, but most often they're motivated purely by chaos. Their goal is to be able to take the weaponizing our nation's children to be able to create terror, to be able to show just how harmful they can be. And they do that oftentimes by seeking out to target the most vulnerable. Children who may already be demonstrating mental health issues, who may be indicating that they have thoughts of self-harm, perhaps they have eating disorders. Those children may be looking for solace, for comfort, for advice in online platforms and spaces where they can find a community. And unfortunately, these offenders are infiltrating and targeting those communities to be able to create relationships with those children, and then to be able to push boundaries, to test them, to see if they can hold up a sign with their name on it, maybe hold up a sign with a signal or a logo. And by doing this, they're testing those boundaries to see how far they can push that child. Can they get them to put their name on their body? Can they get them to carve the name into the body? And unfortunately, that incrementalization can often lead to really tragic results. Each step along the way can be weaponized against that child. And what we often see is a swarming kind of effect, where multiple offenders will go after the same child at one point in time. The imagery, the videos, the chats that we are seeing and reading are the most graphic that I have ever seen in my 20-year history. We are hearing from law enforcement out in the field who have said that this is the most disturbing content as well. So you're talking about seasoned professionals who are really meeting their match with the new and evolving types of exploitation that we are seeing.
Yeah. Ms. Smolar, I'm going to forget my lead in. I want to get to the question because my time's running out. Could you share why we need federal legislation specifically to address these gore groups and other individuals who engage in sextortion? Share your experience with us in working with investigations involving these groups.
Your microphone.
I apologize. Congress has already provided so many important tools to those of us in the field, like mandatory minimums for crimes like receipt and distribution of child pornography or production. We need those tools in order to properly hold these type of defendants accountable. Right now, when we charge crimes like sextortion or 764 across the country, we all charge them differently. Sometimes we charge them as online threats. Sometimes, if we're lucky, we find CSAM and we charge them that way. There's no consistency that allows us to properly address the specific harm that these actors are committing. In addition, a lot of these actors are overseas, and it would be extremely helpful for those of us who want to extradite people here to the United States to hold them accountable to have a felony statute that specifically speaks to this harm. I'm familiar with a case where a defendant was in Germany, and Germany had a coercion to harm statute, but we did not. They were able to charge that 764 offender there. We could not charge him here. That shouldn't happen. We should be able to charge these offenders, hold them accountable, and deter them from continuing to hurt our children.
Thanks, all three of you. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Smolar, we have considered the issue you raised in your testimony so many times, so many different ways, because it can be characterized by some that if you don't follow the strict sentencing guidelines, that you're soft on crime, that you really don't care enough to impose the adequate sentence. What you tell us is less than 30% of non-production child pornography offenders were sentenced within the recommended guidelines, reflecting broad judicial satisfaction, 70%, and inconsistent sentencing nationwide. You say, as federal prosecutors, my colleagues and I often considered plea offers to binding sentences to avoid the application of the insufficient sentencing guidelines and disparities. Tell me a little more. What are you talking about here?
Especially in cases where you're talking about, for example, possession of CSAM, where there's no mandatory minimum sentence. Oftentimes, my colleagues and I, and not just in the Western District of Pennsylvania, but nationwide, would see sentences that we felt were insufficient. When you're talking about possession of CSAM, you are talking about a real child being harmed in the most serious way possible. And I personally believe that sentences for people who are collecting that type of material should be significant in order to protect victims and to deter others from collecting it. So it's important that the sentencing guidelines are useful to
So
judges.
let me ask you, I understand part of the problem was a numeric issue.
Yes.
Initially, so many instances of objects that a person had led to a certain sentencing guideline. But now that they're being collected in video form or in different technology form, that counting numbers really doesn't tell the story. Is that your impression?
Doesn't. All we were we were talking about math. It's not about math. These are about real offenders and culpability and risk. For example, what you're referring to is one image, one video is 75 images under the sentencing guidelines. You start adding up videos to try to get to 600 images and you get a 5-point enhancement. Use of a computer is a 2-point enhancement. Prepubescent children, 2-point enhancement. But that doesn't really tell the story of these offenders and how dangerous they potentially are. So legislation will be needed to address, are they on specific darknet forums talking about how to abuse children? Are they using multiple platforms to try to get to children or to share this material? Are they, how severe are the images and how many victims are in them? That is not necessarily encompassed by the sentencing guidelines right now. So legislation is needed to address offender risk.
Ms. Coffren, I was interested with the chairman's question that you responded that sometimes the object of this exploitation is chaos. It's not financial. Tell me a little more on that. What is the value of this perpetrator wasting all of these hours leading to the self-harm of a young person or worse?
Right. Thank you so much for that question, Senator. What we are seeing is these loosely coordinated groups that you've been referencing, like 764 and some of these other that we are referencing as sadistic online, are fueled and motivated by being able to have clout and notoriety for the impact of their actions. This means it extends much more beyond just CSAM. It is how can they use children to harm themselves or the others, and then harm the community as well. So we also see children being coerced into planning school shootings or threatening their communities as well, that are also offshoots of this type of work. So child sexual exploitation has actually been hijacked as one methodology for a larger way of trying to be able to use children against the community and for shock and for awe. The more that we talk about this, unfortunately, we feed their desire for that notoriety, for the impact that they're having, and these sometimes called nihilistic violent groups as well, is really fueled by something that we're just not that familiar with operating with, which is pure chaos.
Ms. Woods, how long do you think your son was being exploited before he finally lost his life?
It was 19 and a half hours. Well, he received 200 messages in 19 and a half hours with what we believe 4 different people attacking him at one time.
Do you have any idea where the source of these attacks was?
His murderers are in Ivory Coast.
Oh.
And we, of course, don't have, we're told we'll never receive justice for James.
I'm so sorry for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, all 3 of you.
Thank you, Senator Rubin. Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yet another very emotional hearing about a topic that we constantly talk about and do little about. I'm perplexed. I could understand having differences on health care and taxes and you name it. We have a different. All of us agree on this pretty much. What is going on in the Senate and the House where no matter who's in charge, nothing really happens? I said this when I was chairman. So here we are in 2025. This 764 group, so how do you say your last?
Smolar.
So I want to acknowledge the FBI is the District of Columbia U.S. Attorney's Office brought a case against 2 people. Y'all familiar with that? That's a good start, right? Kash Patel is focused on this group. Should they be domestic terrorists under U.S. law?
It's a good question, Senator. I can tell you, even within the FBI, there are cross-programmatic focuses on this group because
I mean, do you think they should be domestic terrorists? If these people are not domestic terrorists, who would be?
a lot
I mean,
of
y'all both just told us that they're trying to bring down society by harming our children and exploiting them. Why shouldn't they be domestic terrorists?
I do know that they have been charged in at least one case as domestic terrorists.
Well, I'd like to put a list. Ms. Coffren, are you okay with making this group, domestic terrorists?
I think when we're looking at how individuals are weaponizing our children, a lot more research needs to be done.
Not really. No, not really.
Certainly.
No. This phone, do you think it's a dangerous product for children, Ms. Woods?
Yes, I do. And to
What do you
answer
think? What's more dangerous, smoking or this?
oh, the phone, of course.
Do you agree with that?
I do.
Do you agree with that?
Without a doubt.
Okay. Well, I'm not urging people to smoke. I don't think kids should smoke. Why don't we label this a dangerous product, at least inform consumers better? Do you agree that's a good idea?
I agree.
Okay. There's so many good ideas, and I want to compliment this committee, who's oftenly divided, for coming up with one good idea after another. From, Senator Hawley, Blackburn, all of us, Cornyn, everybody's working together. Nobody's been better on this than Senator Durbin. So February is the 30th anniversary of Section 230. Are you familiar with Section 230? Ms. Woods, are you familiar with it?
Yes, sir.
You really can't sue anybody that was involved in helping these people murder your son, can you?
No.
Do you all agree that it's time to revisit Section 230?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you believe it's time to open the courtrooms to people who have been harmed by this behavior?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you agree that Section 230 gives a legal pass to some of the most bizarre, harmful behavior in the country, and 30 years later, we should revisit Section 230?
Yes.
Okay, me too. So what are we going to do? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a letter to Senator Thune and Senator Schumer, both good men. And in February, we should have like a social media week where we take all these good ideas and we dedicate a week or 2 weeks to doing nothing on the floor but this, to try to take these laws that everybody coming up with and put them in a big package and put us all on record as, are we all talk, or are we willing to act? Do y'all like that idea?
I sure do.
Great idea.
We'll have like a couple of months to let the country know. Tune in February. We're going to do some things to protect your children and see where the Senate is on this. Would you support that idea?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'd like my colleagues to think creatively what should be on that list. But come February, on the 30th anniversary of Section 230, I'd like to have an effort on the floor of the Senate to deal with the dark side of Section 230. So I think that would be very, very helpful. Now, the cost of doing business. Do you agree with me? The more likely you are to go to jail, a lot of people will avoid that area.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you agree with me that the more likely you are to get sued if you put out a bad product, the more likely you are to try to change that product?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you all agree that we've, as a nation, miserably failed our children? That we have hearings and we talk and we've done very little to protect them as of this state?
Yes.
Yes.
That's a damning indictment of all of us. Thank you.
Senator Ronald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our panel for testifying. And Ms. Woods, our hearts go out to you for the tragic loss of your son. As I look at this issue, and as mentioned by my colleagues, that we have been wrestling with child exploitation, which is only getting worse. not getting any better, it's getting worse, and acknowledged by all of us, a sense of frustration, because this is actually an issue that receives bipartisan focus and a desire on our part to do more than what we've done so far. And I'm looking at this issue by way of focusing on, I think there's a prevention aspect to it, there's a prosecution aspect to it, and as Ms. Smolar says, the laws have not kept up with all of the kinds of ways that these exposures coming up to evade prosecution. So there's a prosecution part. And then I would say there is a civil remedies part, which is really looking at Section 230 and removing the kind of immunity, that total immunity that Section 230 provides. So if I look at the prevention side, what can we do to prevent the kind of tragedy that overtook James?
So it's a number of things. I will say from the Do It for James Foundation, over the last 3 years, we averaged less than $10,000 in grants. We're not getting approved to even do the prevention. It is all on the backs. My husband and I have given hundreds of thousands of dollars each year to make sure that we do so. That's one. Two, we have to make this a demand to talk about it in schools. My husband and I have talked to well over 200,000 children, and because we made them aware of something they knew about but didn't know quite it was illegal, nor did they know what it was called, it led to 4 arrests and 2 being investigated, and hundreds of kids being saved by dying by suicide. So we have to make sure that not only are you all educated, not only are our law enforcement agents educated, but also our children need to be included in this education so that we know what to do if we were ever presented by these murderers out there, that we can let the kids know that they need to call NECMEC and make sure that they have references that they needed and resources.
I couldn't agree with you more, because it is the children who are being targeted for exploitation. And if our children are not aware that if this happens to them and they are targeted, that there are places to go, that they ought to inform, because I would think that if you're a child and you're the target, you don't want to talk about it. You're trying to hide it, whatever that is happening. So would the three of you agree that we need to do a lot better to get the communities and the children much more able to call out what is happening to them? And what is it that we need to do? Do we provide grants to the Department of Justice and make sure that both DOJ and Homeland Security pay attention to these horrible crimes that are happening, and rather than focusing so much of their resources on immigration, that they ought to, DOJ and Homeland Security should have the resources to go after this kind of exploitation. But I just wanted to get the sense from all three of you, what specifically should we be doing on the prevention side of the scale? And then for Ms. Smolar to tell us what we can do to provide law enforcement the better tools to prosecute these crimes. So do you want to share some of your grants to organizations? Yes. Any other ideas on the prevention side?
Quickly,
Sorry. Thank you, Senator. In addition, we can't prosecute our way out of this. That is clear. We do need the tools to be able to properly prosecute these crimes, but education is key. I can't tell you how many people I told I was coming here today to talk about 764, and they look at me blankly. They don't know what it is. We need more public education of children, teachers, coaches, clergy, people who interact with children, who could maybe look at their arms, see if there's strange cuts, see if they look different, if they're acting differently. PSAs are important. FBI has issued a number of PSAs on this group, but I don't even think that's enough. We need more public education in the schools, in the places where children congregate, so that they are not afraid to come forward and report these crimes.
Ms. Coffren?
Prevention is also detection. So what we need to be able to see is companies able to detect some of these keywords that are happening in chats, flagging for that, making the kinds of reports, allowing law enforcement to investigate this before those offenders are able to go on, create new profiles, and blackmail, sextort, or coerce other children. So I think taking a look too as well as to updating some of the guidelines around what it takes to report. Are technology companies required to be transparent about what it is that they're doing behind the scenes as well? All of those efforts can actually help to save lives if we know what steps are being taken behind the scenes.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you, Senator Ronald. Now, Senator Cornyn.
Thank you all for being here. This is the third hearing we've had on this topic, and I'm appreciative of the chairman and for scheduling it, but strikes me we need to actually do something more. The problem is, Ms. Smolar, you mentioned all the different sources of this information, CSAM and others, including the dark web. But as you just said, we can't prosecute ourselves out of this. Senator Graham said, well, maybe we ought to create an opportunity to sue. But could you just briefly describe the challenges, including international sources of this information and jurisdictional and other legal constraints that make that impractical?
There are a lot of challenges in handling these cases. The darknet, VPNs, the smarter, more sophisticated offenders are able to hide their identities through encryption and through VPNs. So it is a huge challenge for law enforcement to identify the perpetrators here. In addition, resources is always a problem. International offenders is an issue. We had international offenders in a lot of the cybercrime cases that I handled, and we would get together with law enforcement in many, many countries and discuss these matters. That doesn't always happen in this area, and it's something that should, because these crimes are international in scope. These offenders are coming from outside the U.S.
Well, Ms. Woods, you said your son's murderer was from Africa?
Yes. Ivory Coast. And we don't have an extradition treaty. They stated that they'll never hand over any of their natural born citizens.
Well, it seems to me like we are trying to play catch up, but the technology and the bad guys are outpacing us at almost every turn. And of course, I know Senator Hawley has a bill to deal with chat bots, but just to folks who are not familiar with that name, these are folks. This is technology that simulates human interaction. So somebody actually thinks that they're talking, perhaps, to a human being, and we can only imagine the uses to which that technology could be put to damage our children or cause them to hurt themselves or take their lives. So Australia has passed a law that says that children under the age of 16 can't get access to social media accounts. What do you think about that, Ms. Woods?
Well, I would like to say that
I know your son was 17, but
yes.
Do you think it would help?
Oh, yes. I think that first of all, Tim and I did an article for Australia in 2023 when our son passed, and they didn't have the actual law in place. Since then, they made sure that they had a law. Even though our son was 17 years of age, we have to look at we allowed him to be online before that age. And what if we would have had these laws in place? It would have still made a difference. And even though we lost our only child, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to stand here and stand up for anybody else's kids. You all's kids are my kids. So I'm going to make sure that things get done.
Well, God bless you for doing that.
Thank you.
Ms. Coffren, NCMEC has been the leader in this area. And when it comes to child exploitation, do you think that Congress should consider a law banning the use of social media for children 16 and younger?
Certainly, that is one tool that would be kind of in the arsenal of being able to address this. I think we have to look at the different types of age restrictions, age assurances, age gatings. There's an awful lot of complexity that goes around into that. And so we need to be able to look at ways of holding the social media companies and online platforms responsible, as well as the device or the app stores, as well as ensuring that there's better parental controls.
Well, they've got technology that I just barely struggle to understand. And certainly they would be in the best position, would they not, Ms. Smolar, to know what's happening on their own platforms?
Correct. Although I will state that in a lot of these crimes, the offenders will find a child, for example, on Snapchat or Instagram, but then they will move them to a different application like Signal, where we have no control over that.
Ms. Coffren, if Senator Grassley will allow me, you mentioned something that intrigued me when you said some of these platforms, some of the information or some of these individuals are inciting to chaos.
Mhm.
What did you mean by that?
So they're motivated purely by a goal, not sexual exploitation of a child. They are not the traditional, pedophile that we might think about. Their goal is to cause disruption in our communities, to have us holding hearings today, talking about just how difficult it is to think about our children being harmed, for shock and for awe. And so when that is the new type of offender, we need new types of tools. Looking at the types of signals that exist on the social media platforms, the chats, how people are operating is going to be really essential to try to stay current to these kind of evolving statuses of new offenders and new motivations.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I spoke with each of the three of you earlier, I am just so grateful for your work, for your commitment, and your willingness to talk about this. And it has been so interesting to me as someone who has worked to protect children and to really focus on what was happening with technology and in this virtual space. And it is astounding to me that there are laws in the physical space that protect children. You cannot endanger a child. You can't sell them alcohol. You can't sell them tobacco. You cannot expose them to pornography. If you were a liquor store and you were selling to kids, they would padlock your store and take away your license. But in the virtual space, our children are vulnerable 24/7, 365. And I think during the COVID pandemic, many parents realized what was happening with the phone and their child. That is why you're seeing bell to bell, no phones in schools. That's why you are seeing other laws take place. And Ms. Woods, as I said to you, I'm just heartbroken for you as a mother and a grandmother and having teenage grandsons. This is a fear, an absolute fear that parents have because the sextortion schemes and the targeting of young boys, it's like something that happens within a matter of hours and days. And I appreciated your comment about your son being murdered. He was targeted, and then he was literally cyber bullied to death. And this is why we need to pass the Kids Online Safety Act. This is why my Report Act, and Ms. Coffren, you mentioned that, was signed into law. And more needs to be done to protect children in the virtual space. Ms. Woods, I want to come to you and just give you a minute to talk about why these platforms should be required to force safety by design and to put that burden on these social media platforms to root out these bad actors.
Yes, so there's a number of things that I would like to say with that. First of all, social media and different applications actually, I say, save face. So they say that they have parental controls. But did anyone know that on Google, if your child is 12 years old and once they turn 13, Google directly messages your child and tells them that they no longer need parental control and they can click here to opt out. That's what I mean by parental controls are not enough. We are put and made to have a responsibility as parents to protect our children in every way. And yet there's other obstacles involved that intervene in us parenting our child in the most appropriate way. The other thing too is that by social media actually making sure that we have laws in place like the Social Media Act, Parental Act, is making sure that we can monitor our kids better. But when there's acronyms like when my son said, "I'm going to kill myself," it would have alerted me. It would have alerted any parent that had lost their children's lives, and it would have told me something's wrong. I wish that even today, 3 years later, that I would have known half of the things that I would have had, or even be put in a position where I could have taught my son to come to us in certain manners. He came to us for whatever, if it was a hole in his sack, whatever he needed. But yet our social media platforms took a time to not say anything.
So what advice would you give to parents right now, sitting there today?
My advice
Parents
that
of teens.
my advice that I would give to parents is to talk to your children about sextortion and any other child exploitation. I knew nothing about it. Every parent that lives here today that has a child has a privilege I did not have. It is free. Let's talk about it. Let's educate our children. And what I would say to children is be vulnerable one more time. One more time. Yes, you may not have made the best decision. We are all that way. We make mistakes. You matter enough through your mistakes. I don't care what it is. You speak up. You say something. You stand up for yourself, because we can make sure that we have your back no matter what. I would give anything to have my son back. And if they have to learn, if they have to see James' face, if they have to see my tears, I'm going to make sure that it happens. If it means that I can save your grandchildren, I'm going to do it.
Thank you.
Senator Blackburn, thank you. Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Thank you very much for doing this hearing. I think it's very useful. I want to welcome and thank all of the witnesses. Ms. Woods, I'm sorry that this has become so personal for you. There's really not much that is worse than what you have been through, and I really admire that you've come here to talk about it, because it can't be easy, and I'm grateful to you. And Ms. Smolar, as a former United States attorney, I'm always impressed by the assistant United States attorney who did the real work, and I'm delighted that you are here. And Ms. Coffren, thank you for your wonderful advocacy. I want to pick up a little bit on where I understand Senator Graham was with respect to getting rid of Section 230. I strongly believe that Section 230 has long outlived its use, and it is now a real vessel for evil that needs to come to an end. The laws that Section 230 protects these big platforms from are very often laws that go back to the common law of England that we inherited when this country was initially founded. I mean, these are long-lasting, well-tested, important legal constraints that they've met the test of time, not by the year or by the decade, but by the century. And yet, because of this crazy Section 230, these ancient and highly respected doctrines just don't reach these people. And it really makes no sense that if you're an internet platform, you get treated one way, you do the exact same thing, and you're a publisher, you get treated a completely different way. And so I think that the time has come. I think it's pretty widely known that there were a core 4 of us ready to proceed with a bipartisan bill, 2 and 2, and a lot of work, important work, good work, valuable work has gone into making sure that other members of the committee and other members of the Senate have a chance to look at that and decide whether they want to join or not. And I'm at the stage right now where I think we just need to go. We just need to file that bill and start moving. And everybody else can make up their decision whether they want to join or not. But continuing to delay while people deliberate whether to join or not, everybody's had plenty of time. I think this is fish or cut bait time. So I hope very much that we can proceed. I hope it's more than core 4. I hope it's core 8 or core 10 or core 12 or perhaps even unanimous on the committee. But it really makes no sense. And stories like Ms. Woods and like the story of the Rhode Island family that was affected show how alone and stranded people are when they don't have the chance to even get justice. It's bad enough to have to live through the tragedy. It's bad enough to have to bear for the rest of your life that loss. But to be told by a law of Congress, you can't get justice because of the platform, not because the law's wrong, not because the rule's wrong, not because this is anything new, simply because the wrong type of entity created this harm. And, I look at what was done with the lawsuit by the Connecticut families whose children were killed in grade school, and the accountability of a loudmouth for having whipped up the false theory that that whole thing was a fake, was staged, that they were props, that their children weren't actually killed. You're never going to make that get better for those parents, but at least they know that the world listened. They at least know that they got the chance in an honest courtroom, and they at least know that they got a victory out of it. They got a win. And the person responsible for that really vile misconduct had to face an enormous, enormous civil judgment that he's still being pursued over. And that's not nothing. So that's my statement. And let's hope that we can finally get this 230 thing moving in this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Woods, I want to start with you, and I just want to say to you and to your husband, thank you for your courage and your advocacy, and thank you for sharing with us just a little piece of the life of your beautiful son. I'm a father of 3 myself, 2 boys and a little girl, and my oldest boy is now a teenager. He just turned 13. And so as I look out at the landscape that he is coming into in social media, I'm terrified by it. But I just know, parent to parent, your son's life is changing the world.
Oh, thank you.
He is changing the world, and you giving him voice as you and your husband are doing. That's the only thing that's going to make change here in Washington, D.C., I can tell you, because who currently has a hammer hold on the United States Senate are the big technology companies who spend endless amounts of money to control the Senate. And let's just be honest. We may as well put a sign on the floor of the Senate that says property of big tech, because nothing moves across that floor, in my observation, nothing that they don't want. They spend money to control and to buy access and influence. And the only thing that will break that, I believe, is the truth of experiences like yours and the voice of your sons to confront lawmakers with the fact that unless we act and do something, unless we stand up to these corporate interests, more and more children like yours will lose their lives, will lose their futures, will lose their hope. So I just want to say thank you, because you are the tip of the spear. I mean, you are what is making the change. I noticed in your testimony, your written testimony, I was reading it just a second ago, I noticed you pointed out that as to your boy, no system protected him, no platform stopped it. And then you pointed out Meta, for example, has features that flag all inappropriate language that we use when making posts, and all that happens almost instantaneously. But as you said a moment ago, nobody flagged anything for you. None of those systems were deployed to help your son. And I think the reality of that is that Meta didn't care about deploying systems to help your son because it didn't make him any money.
Right.
If it makes them money, they're happy to do it.
Right.
But it didn't make any money for them to help your son. And so they just stood by. And I just want to point out something that Meta is doing right now. Let's take a look at the Meta chatbot policy. Not only is Meta not protecting kids like your boy, Meta actually is looking to make money by targeting children who are your son's age and younger. This is a document that was leaked by a Meta whistleblower that is their policies when it comes to chatbots with children. And if you look here, the first line, it says, it is acceptable, this is Meta's own words, it is acceptable to engage a child in conversations that are romantic or sensual. So here Meta is with a deliberate policy to target children, teenagers, your boy's age and younger, for the purposes of exploiting them. Why? So they can make money. What are the consequences of that? Well, let's look at another young man who is just a few years younger than your boy. Sewell Seltzer was his name. Sewell was 14. He's a handsome kid. This was a great kid. I've gotten to know his parents, and much like your son, Ms. Wood, I mean, this is just a fantastic kid. He also was the victim of sextortion. The difference with your son is that his sextortion was pursued by a chatbot. It wasn't even human. You know, your son's killers are beyond the reach. They're in a different country. They're hiding behind all of the various laws and treaties, and of course the platforms themselves. This young man's killer, an AI chatbot, can't be held accountable because they've got special protections that no other corporation in the country or the world gets. The chatbot that engaged with young Sewell engaged him in sexting activities, and then urged him to commit suicide, told him how to commit suicide, and tragically, he did it. And his parents, much like you now, are giving voice to him, to his legacy. But the true justice that will come for boys like Sewell, for young men like Sewell, for young men like your son, James, and for other young Americans out there is we have to be able to hold these technology companies accountable. And that is why I've introduced legislation that will prevent the AI companies from targeting minors with chatbots. It is time for this committee to mark up this bill. Senator Britt is a co-sponsor. Senator Blumenthal is a co-sponsor. Senator Murphy is a co-sponsor. My point is it's bipartisan. This committee needs to mark that bill up, and we need to protect our kids from the profiteering of these corporations. And we need to do something else. This committee passed unanimously legislation that would allow the parents of victims of child sex abuse material, allow them to sue companies that put that child sex abuse material online, that host it knowingly or recklessly. We passed it unanimously. It is languishing on the Senate floor, unanimously out of the Judiciary Committee months ago, and it is sitting on the floor of the Senate. Why? Because big tech fears it. They don't want it to move. I call now, today, on Senate leadership, which is controlled by my party. I call on them to put that bill on the floor. Listen to the testimony of Ms. Woods. Heed the witness of her son. Heed the witness of Sewell Seltzer. Listen to the young Americans whose lives have been lost and destroyed by predators. Put this bill on the floor. There is no excuse for further delay. No amount of money from big tech can ever sanction or make right our inability to act, our failure to do so. This committee has acted. It is time for the Senate to act. And it would be a travesty, inexcusable for this Congress to close out this year without taking action to protect our children. Thank you again all for being here. Thank you, Ms. Wood, especially for you. Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think that sentiment that Senator Hawley expressed that many of us feel about the bills that have come through the committee and the work that we've done. We know that one bill that did pass that you noted, Ms. Coffren, thank you, was the Take It Down Act that I authored with Senator Cruz, signed into law by President Trump. And as you know, that criminalizes the distribution of and threats to distribute non-consensual intimate images, whether they are AI created or real. And I would also add, to echo some of my colleagues, particularly Senator Graham, that it's long past time to repeal Section 230. At the beginning of his efforts on that front, I had thought, well, no, maybe we can put in these rules in place and the tech companies will work with us. And that just hasn't happened. The opposite has happened. And as we approach this 30-year anniversary, maybe it's time to do a major assessment, which takes for any parent about 1 minute, to realize the harm that has been caused by all of this. I'd start with you, Ms. Woods. Thank you for your moving testimony. Can you talk about why even the threat of non-consensual distribution of explicit images can be tragic, and why it's so vital that the law covers threats, as the Take It Down Act does, as well as reality?
So it's a number of things. First of all, our children aren't just handing out the nudes. They are being coerced into providing them with, in regards to creating safe spaces and different things of that sort. Once the threat behind the nude comes, it's not just the nude being in existence, it's all of the threats behind it, to where they're questioning what they're actually doing, and they're becoming desperate and willing to do whatever they can to get rid of that image. It is embarrassing to them. We tell kids all the time, if you put it on the internet, it won't go away. My son in particular was threatened. He was actually slated to be number 1 in the state of Ohio in 110 hurdles. And they told him he would never run track again. They told him he would be labeled a pedophile because he was under 18, and they did have a nude photo of him. It becomes far more than the embarrassment of the actual picture, but the actual torture that comes after the picture.
Right.
And so by them being able to have Take It Down as an option, it takes a weight off of them. And they are able to address all the other issues that come after it. But once we take that photo away, then we can battle everything else. And I think that helps them with that.
Thank you. Thank you. And as you know, Ms. Coffren, the Take It Down Act gives victims not only the rights with regard to the people doing this, but the rights to demand that the social media platforms take these images down. I wrote a piece today in the New York Times about AI and just how important it is to allow the states to keep doing their work while we're waiting on the leadership to bring up these bills for a vote. I just believe that if you are not going to do anything federally, you better do something in the states, but also that you've got to hold these platforms liable. And could you talk about that?
Sure. The biggest threat that children face is not necessarily a criminal justice proceeding or the fear of what's going to be happening next. They just want their images down. So the threats that these bad actors are using against them is actually a recirculation of the same diatribes that we've been telling children for years in a prevention type method. Don't do this action, or once it's out there, it's always out there and you'll never get it back. That has to change. The Take It Down Act changes that significantly by requiring that company to, within 48 hours, to be able to be removing that. Children need to know that they have that right for that content to come down, so that the threat to recirculate, there's power taken away from that and the child gets that power back. So that act is really revolutionary, because historically what we've seen is companies taking, a week, 2 week, sometimes non-removals at all. And the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children publishes our data about the companies that we send notices for, those companies that take it down, how long it takes them to take it down, and which companies choose not to. All that information is public, and we're trying to make sure that people can find that and are aware.
That'll be very, very helpful for all of us. Ms. Smolar, last a short question here, different, little related but different topic. Senator Blackburn and I introduced the National Human Trafficking Database Act to establish a national human trafficking database at the DOJ's Office for Victims of Crime, to incentivize states to report data, a little bit along the lines of what we're hearing from Ms. Coffren on the Take It Down bill. Can you talk about the data sharing in this area and how it can empower law enforcement to protect victims of human trafficking?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Human traffickers move victims across state lines all the time. That's how they make money. That is how they get more victims by crossing state lines. So having nationwide data for law enforcement is invaluable to be able to talk to their colleagues in different states, to get information on different traffickers, on victims. We try to rescue victims all the time. So without that data, you can't do that.
Senator Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. I really appreciate it. Ms. Woods, Ms. Smolar, Ms. Coffren, I cannot thank you enough for being here today. My name is Ashley Moody. I became the first mom of a school kid ever on Florida's cabinet when I became the Attorney General. My kid was still in school, and I debated how that was going to be a challenge. But ultimately, that challenge of balancing that and making that work became my biggest driver. And I am listening to you guys talk this morning, and I'm so grateful we have people like you willing to speak up and stay focused on this and not let up. Because I am telling you, the focus of large corporations on profit, that never lets up. And that is a fight all in of itself. In fact, if you are a representative of a large tech platform or any of the associations or represent them in government affairs, could you please stand up? I just would like the chairman to note, not one person is here for this testimony to listen to a mother who lost her only child. Thank you for showing up. Let me tell you when they do show up. In 2004, because Congress has done nothing. Oh, and you know what we did get passed this last year? It was because of a mom showed up in Congress and said, you have to get this done. Melania Trump said, show up. We have to pass this. The Take It Down Act. We've got to pass it. And it did, because a mom showed up and didn't let up. You've heard from multiple people say Congress is doing nothing, that Congress is under the thumb of big tech because of financial influence. Lindsey Graham said, how is this happening? Maybe we do something next year. In fact, he said, nothing really happens. So because Congress hasn't done anything, what have we had to do in the states? When I was the only mom on the Florida cabinet of a school-age kid, we passed legislation in Florida. We were one of the very first states to protect kids online in 2024. We protected young kids. We got it done. We were one of the first states. Now other states have had to follow suit because what happens in Congress? Nothing really happens. And we did it. But you know where these big tech companies show up? Their lawyers, their lobbyists, their government representatives. You know where they do show up? In court to fight us when we get something done. So when we passed it in Florida and I showed up in court when they sued us to overturn the law and spent all of that money to sue when the state actually did something to stand up for their kids, we fought it. And I am proud to tell you, they showed up there to fight us. I am proud to tell you, fighting hard, staying focused, staying persistent, showing up, we just got to win. We just got to win in court. In fact, I am proud to tell you that that piece of legislation got upheld in the 11th Circuit, and I think we're going to win it. It just shows to show you, you can do something. We looked at all those other states that had tried something that got blocked, and we took that into account when we passed our law. And now we're winning in court. And we're winning against those companies. And when I'm telling you what, I'm watching you, you've blended everything from being a mother. I was a former federal prosecutor. I have worked on human trafficking, constantly led the human trafficking group within our statewide human trafficking council. I won't give up. And we're making progress in this fight. And now I just got appointed United States Senator, and we're going to do that here. I'd like them to show up so I can fight them in person right here in this hearing. Because that's what's got to happen. If we're going to move anything, as Lindsey Graham says, if we're going to have anything really happen, we've got to have people speaking out. Thank you, ma'am, for making it known that this is happening under our noses. Stranger danger doesn't work anymore. Don't get into the van doesn't work anymore. It's happening in our kids' bedrooms, and we need to be vocal about it and say, if they're not your friend in real life, they can't be your friend online. Let's get that message out, and I appreciate you speaking out, and I hope other kids will not be embarrassed enough to share this with their friends, and we're going to work on that. Please come to my office so we can come up with a plan. I will say, as a former federal prosecutor, having a specific crime, outlawing and providing penalties for sextortion, as a prosecutor, I know that would have been helpful. I appreciate you, Ms. Smolar. Have you seen a specific piece of legislation yet presented on outlining the elements of sextortion federally and what criminal penalty would be tied to that?
Other than proposed legislation,
Have you seen it filed? A piece of proposed legislation?
not yet.
So we need to get that done. As a former federal prosecutor, one to another, I will pledge to you we will make that happen. We also need to see that in the states. Do you think that would be helpful in the states?
Absolutely.
To see a specific sextortion crime defined with penalties attached in the states?
We work with states all the time on these cases.
As a
and
former Florida Attorney General, I created a cyber unit that worked specifically on these crimes. That was incredibly helpful. They could go out immediately, recover evidence, begin work on investigations. Do you think having those specialty units in each state working with federal partners would be helpful?
Absolutely. We do that all the time on these type of cases. In addition, a lot of the defendants, some of the perpetrators of some of these crimes are juveniles, and the states can prosecute juveniles and place juveniles. The federal government, it's much harder to do that.
Well, I have run out of time, but let me just again say thank you for not losing focus. Thank you for not losing passion on behalf of the kids of this nation. They are going to be the ones that carry this message to their peers, and we need to continue pushing this message until it seeps into their vocabulary, and this is commonplace for them to talk through these things. Thank you so much.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all of you for being here today. And I know about the work that you have done and deeply respect your advocacy and your steadfastness on behalf of this cause, and also my colleagues for their passion and eloquence. But it's really pretty simple. So far as federal legislation is concerned, what we need is votes. You know, we need votes. We voted on the Kids Online Safety Act in the United States Senate and passed it by a margin of 91-3 in the last session. And I would invite my colleagues to speak as passionately to the House leadership, which failed last session to give the Kids Online Safety Act a vote. Not a vote. And this session, we have more than 60 co-sponsors again in the United States Senate for the Kids Online Safety Act, and we undoubtedly will for other measures as well. But big tech is exercising its sway, using its armies of lawyers and lobbyists. You have spoken powerfully today. My colleagues are on the right side of this issue. No one is in favor of child exploitation. But the fact is, Ms. Woods, as you wrote in your remarks about abuse and exploitation of your son, quote, no system protected him, no platform stopped it. And I've met countless parents who feel the same way. The common factor in all their stories is the one gatekeeper that makes this abuse possible is, in fact, big tech. It's Meta and others who are allowing predators from around the world to use their platforms and make our kids prey to exploiters who are sometimes beyond our borders. So I guess I would invite you, Ms. Woods, and perhaps others to talk directly to Speaker Johnson in the House of Representatives and tell him what you think he should do.
You have my commitment on that.
And perhaps others of you, witnesses, maybe you can tell me what impact or influence you can have in the House of Representatives. Have you been asked to testify at a hearing there?
I have not.
Certainly, we would love to work together to be able to get legislation passed. We see so many bills coming forward. We've seen the success of bills like the Report Act, like the Take It Down Act, when they're nuanced, when they are focused, and when they can be introduced and passed very quickly. We've been able to see huge success in that. The Report Act is a great example. We saw increases in the amount and types of both child sex trafficking and online enticement that came. When we see those acts pass, we see progress, we see movement because we're holding companies accountable. If we don't, the rest of that reporting is voluntary. Those two reporting requirements were permitted to be received prior to then, and we certainly know that the prevalence didn't increase, just the responsibility to report.
And I just want to close by saying, we want a bill, we want a law. We don't just want speeches, but we want a bill that is effective. And right now, the House has weakened the Kids Online Safety Act bill, in effect decimating the duty of care, which prevents the kinds of abuses and holds the platforms accountable. It imposes a legal responsibility on big tech when it knows or should know about exactly the harms that you have come here to highlight. Decimating that duty of care is a disservice to all of the parents and all of the children who have become victims. And when you talk to members of the House, I would urge you to insist on a real protection for kids. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Britt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate you all being here today. Mrs. Woods, thank you for continuing to tell your story. Thank you for continuing to honor James, to make sure that we all learn as parents. I have said this quite frequently. As parents, we're all just doing the best we can. And I am grateful to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who have come together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as concerned parents and grandparents, knowing that what we're facing right now is just beyond comprehension. As a mom, you work so diligently to keep your children safe. And used to, you would get them home at night and you would lock the doors and you'd be able to kind of exhale. And now the enemy is inside our home. The people who want to do our children harm are in the palm of their hand. And if we can't do this as Congress, what are we here for? We are here to protect the most vulnerable. We are here to protect our greatest asset. And to me, that is the next generation. And so thank you for continuing to raise your voice and ensure that you push this body to do what it needs to. I would love to know from your perspective, Mrs. Woods, in particular, in your written testimony, you said large corporations continue to argue for rights while refusing to actually take responsibility. I think that sums it up. Tell me what you want us to know as we continue to push these various pieces of legislation to the floor. I am a proud co-sponsor of probably every single one of them. And to your point, we're looking for, how do we get something through? I think we heard Ms. Coffren say the faster we get it done, the more narrowly tailored it is, the greater chance for success. But we know we need sweeping and overarching reform because big tech is always going to care about one thing, and that's their profits. And we know they know what they're doing. I think it was just said in Reuters that big tech has said, Meta said about $16 billion of their actual profits are really directly related to scams and to ads on banned goods. It's insane. So tell me from your perspective what you think we need to do. What are the simple fixes that would ultimately have been able to save your son's life?
Um, well, one, I definitely think education and for us to pass that education law. I'm really, really big on education. That's
Mrs.
how.
Woods, I love that you said that because every school group that I get a chance to talk to, I say, hold on, here's my mom moment. And then we go directly into the things that you're talking about. So education, one.
Education is number one,
Okay.
because the crime will never go away.
Mhm.
Even if we set laws, we still have to educate our kids, our community, to make sure that we know when this happens, we can fight against it. But two, I guess I'm coming from a mom in a naive stance. I don't understand why it's so hard to pass laws. Why
Amen.
the money will always be there. I mean, we have people wasting money every day on all kinds of things. Why can we not take our children off of the marketing factor, the prey? I just don't understand how hard that is to protect our children. We won't have a world without them.
That's right. And thank you for what you're doing and pursuing the litigation and saying, no, we need age verification. We need we need these guardrails to protect our kids. And the fact that they continue to prey, and that is exactly what social media companies are doing, are preying on our children because they know having our kids on their platform is how they make more money. And they are unwilling to do the right thing and help us ensure that these kids are protected. And it is moms like you, it is people like you that are stepping up and saying, we must do more, that will ultimately force people in this body, force people in the House to actually do the right thing. So thank you. It should be simple, and this is common sense.
Yes.
I would love in my remaining minute here, I'd love, Mrs. Coffren, for you to tell me, I know Nick Mick works closely with many of the social media companies to address this issue, but you also face challenges. And what are some of the biggest challenges facing Nick Mick, both from technology and actually, the criminality continuing to evolve?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. Both quality and volume are our biggest challenges.
Okay.
It is not enough for a company to make massive reports that are not of good quality that law enforcement can investigate, nor is it appropriate for companies to look the other way and say, if I don't have actual knowledge of what's going on, I'll make no reports. We need to be have diligent, robust reporting, especially seen in the legislation for the Stop CSAM Act, that would require companies to provide detailed reporting that would make these reports far more actionable. Right now, a company is only required to report 2 fields: the date and time, as well as what type of thing they're reporting. But if they don't provide the valuable information to get that report to the appropriate law enforcement so they can investigate, the report is effectively worthless.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me, Ms. Smolar, do you have anything to add to that? Anything you'd like to make sure that we know or that you see in law?
We could use these statutes. We could use the additional tools to prosecute these crimes. Our law enforcement agencies could use the resources to have agents being able to spend the time. With regard to sextortion, for example, you now have 2 different types of offenders. You have the traditional offenders seeking sexual content, but now you have financial scammers who used to go after the elderly or romance scams. Now they're targeting our children. And that is a lot for our law enforcement agents to be able to put their arms around and to be able to handle.
Well, I commit to you to working on this, and let's get something done.
I thank all of you for your testimony today. Your work for today's done, but I'm going to announce that usually members submit questions for answer in writing. Our members on this committee have until December 16th at 5 p.m. to submit questions for answer in writing. And I would ask each of you to answer and return the questions to the committees as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
If you have children, you're going to want to pay attention to this, especially if you live in Missouri. Other states could be following suit, but Missouri-based BJC Healthcare revokes parents' access to their kids' medical records when the kid turns 12 because it's confidential. Kids must grant written permission in order for parents to view it. Kids can make private medical decisions and revoke parents' access at any time. Y'all, this is a massive red flag. This is the list, the paper that they have to do. Let me explain to you what this says, okay? It says here, my chart, proxy application for adolescent patients age 12 to 17. And it says, if you are a parent guardian of a minor child who's between 12 to 17 years of age and wish to have online access to portions of their record, the minor child must be present when requesting access and must sign the request form. Under state law, right, we are required to keep confidential certain types of health information and services provided to minors and can only disclose this information with the minor patient's permission. What the fuck is that? I say this as nicely as humanly possible, but whoever made this a law in Missouri, you're retarded. They are a minor. You're using the word minor. They are 12 years old. My daughter is 16. She's still a minor. She has no privacy. You know when she can have privacy? When she's not living in my house anymore. At 16 years old, I am her parent. I have all access to absolutely everything. At 12 years old, sure as shit, the parent should have access to absolutely everything. For these places to now say that a 12-year-old has to give permission to their parents to disclose anything, that is that slippery slope that the left has been pushing us on for the absolute longest. When you had schools saying that they weren't going to let, they weren't going to let parents know what pronouns these kids wanted to go by. They weren't going to let parents know if the kids came to them about, sexual activity. They were going to keep whatever kids' secrets were brought to teachers in their school, which if we want to really get into it, these teachers at schools these days have lost the line between teacher and, just inappropriate adult in a classroom with children, because there's too many people out there now who are holding positions of power, because a teacher has power over these kids that are holding these positions of power and using it to push their own little agendas or whatever else. When I was in school, I did not know if my teacher was straight or gay. I did not know if they had kids or not. I didn't know if they owned a house or lived in an apartment. I didn't know who they voted for. I didn't know, anything personal about them most of the time, because that's not what it's about. They're supposed to be there to teach you the curriculum and then go about their day afterwards. We were not supposed to try to be buddies or, have this lasting relationship or anything like that. And now the lines have been so incredibly blurred. But when you have states like California with Gavin Newsom signing into law that, these students can have all full, nope, I'm not even going to try to do it. They don't have to tell anybody anything that they don't want to tell them. And the school will, keep their secrets for them. That is a red flag to me. Listen, it's to the point where if somebody said, hey, you either have to live in your car for the next year or go to California and live in a house, my car is looking real comfortable. You could not pay me to go to California, especially while I have a child, because I do not trust that school system there. But this whole thing where the people have decided that children are no longer children. And I think that's one of the biggest things too. When I was a kid, right? And a lot of y'all, because we're in the same age group, or a lot of y'all are older than me even. I'm 43, 44 in January. A lot of people, when we were younger, we played outside. You were home when the street lights came on. You didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have anything, glued to your ear or your hands. You weren't playing video games all the time. I mean, sometimes when Nintendo was out and then Game Boy came out, I was all about it, right? But we did things as kids that were kid-like things. You go ring a doorbell and run, ha ha ha. You go TP somebody's house for Halloween or April Fools or whatever else. You ride your bikes around the neighborhoods with your friends. You drop them all in somebody's front yard. You go running into the house with dirty feet and loud voices and raid a kitchen, and then go back outside, get back on your bikes and ride off. That's a normal thing. Kids these days at 12 years old are, robbing Sephora's or, making TikToks about how great their outfits are or how they can do their hair better than adults. And they're trying to look older and act older. And it has to do with mainstream media, obviously, but also these pushes from adults that do not have children's best interests at heart. When you have a state, Missouri, who is willing to take the rights of parents away, that to me is an issue. At 12 years old, I did not know my ass from my elbow. There's nothing about my life at 12 years old that needed to be private. My parents, my mom needed to know absolutely everything. She needed to be able to tell me what was going on up from down. Because at 12, I did not know anything. Just because we have the internet now and these kids can find out absolutely everything on their own doesn't negate the need for parental consent, parental help, parental control even. You are a child. If you're not old enough to vote or enlist in the army, you are a child. And until then, you should have no privacy. My daughter has a cell phone, right? She's 16. She has a cell phone. I will take that cell phone and look through every single portion of that cell phone at any point in time that I want. You know why? Because it might be her phone, but it's my house and it's my money that pays that cell phone bill. And as her parent, I'm going to make sure that she is doing the right things and that she's hanging around the right people and that there's no weird shit going on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or WhatsApp or what's the other one? Snapchat or she's not Googling weird shit, right? That she's not watching stuff she shouldn't be watching because kids these days can get to any kind of porn stuff. Like there's so much that as parents now we have to be more worried about, and we need to be able to know more about our kids, not less. And so for Missouri to say, hey, listen, mom, dad, parental guidance, whoever you may be, that's taking care of this child at 12 years old, we're going to revoke your privileges to know what's going on with your child's health unless they give you permission. That means they're expecting 12-year-olds to be sexually active. They're expecting 12-year-olds to be doing drugs at some point. They're expecting 12-year-olds to be having questions about their, am I a girl, am I a boy, am I the other, am I whatever? That's what they're expecting. And they're trying to hide it from parents. And that is fucked up. There's nothing okay about this. And the fact that it hasn't been shut down in the states that allow this kind of thing to happen is concerning for me as a parent. I know Florida would never, at least not under Ron DeSantis, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen in other states, right? Now, really quickly, I want to talk about imperative with a non-negotiable short-term deadline. And now you know. The U.S. is racing ahead through private capital, venture funds, and big tech. This is the definition of early. Imagine robots working 20 hours a day, 350 days a year, no fatigue, no sick days, delivering up to 4 times the productivity of a human worker. Dominance in humanoid robotics equals control over the next generation of automation in the defense industrial base. The core thesis is simple. Humanoids will unlock massive, untapped productivity gains across every sector of the global economy. So please, do your own homework on Humanoid Global Holdings, OTC ticker symbol, once again, RBOHF, one of the only publicly traded companies giving you pure play exposure this early in the greatest technological transformation. This says here, this is what they have to sign. Patient must sign an initial below. Is what it says. I agree to allow my parent/guardian to look at all of my health information. I understand that if my record has information about certain services like testing for pregnancy, HIV or AIDS or sexually transmitted infections, counseling about birth control or prescriptions for birth control and or alcohol or drug use or abuse, my parent guardian will be able to see this information. I understand that I can stop my parent guardian from looking at this anytime by revoking their proxy access via my own MyChart account or by contacting MyChart support for assistance. There should be parents protesting in Missouri right now. 100%. And if you're a parent that hears this and thinks that this is okay, you're a shitty parent. If you think that at 12 years old, your child needs to have their own independence health-wise, shitty parent. And I mean that with the utmost whatever. I 100% mean everything that sounds like. There's nothing okay about this. So for those of you in Missouri who have children, just be aware. The next time you take them to the doctor's office, they can sign a little form that tells the doctor they don't want you to know what's going on with them. Hopefully Becky, Bobby, Susie, whatever isn't out there, bumping uglies with somebody at 12 years old, unprotected. But it does happen because that's what they're being shown in all these TV shows, whether you're watching Nickelodeon or Disney or ABC, Fox, CBS, whatever, movies. It's out there. They are sexualizing kids at such a young age. They're making them into adults way sooner than they need to be. And when you have things like this that give them that feeling of independence by allowing them to do these things at such a young age and hide it from their parents, we're entering a realm of beyond fucked up that you don't even want to know how bad it can get. This is like that gateway into parents having no rights. You pop the baby out and then you can't say shit anymore. That child can make whatever decision they want. 2, 3, 4 years old, they can decide they want to go live in, somewhere else. And as a parent, you can't stop them. That's the road that we're on here. Absolutely ridiculous to me. Anyway, y'all, I want to know, do y'all have anything like this in whatever state you're in? Because this is absolutely awful. Personal opinion. And I want to know what you think. And if you have kids that are in Missouri, are you aware of this? Have you talked to your child about this? Maybe they've already signed it and you have no idea. Man, this is crazy to me. The amount of in the dark these states want parents to be when it comes to their minor, underaged children. I mean, really think about that. Okay, that is all. Back to regularly scheduled news tomorrow. I love y'all. Goodbye.